Colorado Territory, winter of 1877. The wind howled like a living thing, dragging sheets of white dust across the frozen valley. Snow beat against the wooden walls of Millfield's auction house, where the smell of wet hay, whiskey, and desperation hung thick as fog. Through that storm rode Ezra Cole, hat brim crusted in frost, his last $20 folded neat inside his coat, money meant for a workhorse to save his dying ranch. He'd buried his father 6 months ago beside a broken fence post and hadn't spoken a word to God since. Somewhere behind his eyes, a memory he never told anyone stirred, a signature on a deed, one that could damn or save him, depending on who asked. He tied his mare outside, boots sinking deep into slush. The sign above the door creaked in the wind. Murphy's Livestock Exchange. Inside, heat slapped his face. Men crowded near the pens, voices low, coins clinking. Ezra scanned for horses. None. Instead, a ripple of murmurs rolled through the room as a thin girl in a gray dress was led onto the block, wrists bound with a frayed rope. Her dark hair was pinned back, but a single strand had escaped, trembling against her cheek. "Gentlemen," the auctioneer barked. "Miss Mara Quinn, age 27, healthy, literate, fit for household or field." Ezra froze. He'd heard of debt servitude before, never seen it. The hammer lifted, and something in him twisted. "Opening bid, $10. A farmer near the rail raised his hand. "15, came another voice, half drunk. The hammer thudded, echoing like a coffin nail. Ezra's fingers brushed the 20 in his pocket. He hadn't come for this. But the look Mara gave the crowd, steady, proud, a spark of defiance behind her fear, cut through him like a whip. Hargreaves' voice came from the back, smooth and sure. 30. Men turned. Silas Hargreave, owner of the Elk Run Railway Company, stood beneath the lanterns in his black coat, smiling as if he owned the air itself. Ezra's gut tightened. He remembered that smile from somewhere. Maybe a courthouse, maybe a funeral. 40, another bidder muttered. Mara's eyes found Ezra's across the crowd. She whispered, barely sound, yet somehow clear. "Please, take me instead." The words hung like frost in the silence. Ezra's throat felt dry as sand. He took one step forward. 50. The crowd gasped. Hargreave turned, amusement flickering in his pale eyes. 50? With what, Cole? You can't feed your own cattle. Ezra's voice hardened. 60, then. Crawford, the auctioneer, blinked. "Sir, payment's cash. I'll work it off. You'll have your money before spring." Laughter spread. Hargreave leaned against the rail. "This isn't a charity barn, son. Leave the law to men who can afford it." A gust of wind slammed the shutters open. Snow burst in like smoke. For a heartbeat, the lamps flickered out. A gunshot cracked near the door. Warning, not death. Men ducked, swore, stumbled. In that brief chaos, Mara jerked the rope loose, stepped off the block, and ran straight toward Ezra. He caught her by instinct. Her breath smelled of cold air and iron. Go, someone hissed from the shadows, a woman's voice, low and commanding. The brief flash of a feathered braid vanished into the snow outside. Chief Nayeli, though Ezra didn't know the name yet. Ezra pulled Mara behind a feed stall as Crawford shouted for order. Get her back on the block. I said go, the hidden voice urged again. Ezra grabbed his $20 note and slapped it into Crawford's trembling hand. There's your sale. That won't. It will, Ezra growled, eyes locked on Hargreave. Unless you want that bullet finding its mark next time. Silence pressed on the room. Snow swirled through the broken shutter, ghost pale under the lamplight. Crawford hesitated, then croaked, sold to Ezra Cole. Hargreaves' smile never moved. Enjoy your purchase, Mr. Cole. You'll find she costs more than she's worth. Ezra ignored him, pulling Mara's torn shawl over her shoulders. Can you ride? Yes, she said simply. They stepped into the storm. The night swallowed them, white wind, black sky, hooves pounding through drifts. Behind them, the auction house door banged open. Hargreaves stood framed in yellow light, coat whipping in the gale. You've made a mistake, he called. We've met before, Cole. Your father and I. He owed me something you can't pay. Ezra didn't answer, but the name burned like fire in his chest. His father's debts had been buried with him, or so he'd believed. By dawn, the road was gone under the snow. Mara rode behind him, silent. He could feel her shiver through the saddle, or maybe it was his own hands trembling. Somewhere between the gusts, he thought he heard her murmur, not to him, but to herself. He doesn't know what's coming. The wind carried the words away. He didn't ask what she meant. Some truths waited until they were ready to cut. When the first light broke over the ridge, Ezra saw smoke rising from his ranch, thin, gray, and wrong. The barn roof had caved under snow. Home was half buried, like a grave. Mara slid down from the horse, stared at the ruins, then at him. Still think you only bought a horse, Mr. Cole? He didn't answer. Somewhere deep inside, a memory stirred again. His father's trembling hand signing a paper, Hargreaves' grin behind it. Justice wasn't dead. It was buried, just waiting for someone to dig. The snow had turned to sleet by the time they reached the valley. The land stretched gray and silent, broken fences rising like bones from the drifts. Ezra's ranch sat hunched against the slope, two chimneys coughing smoke, one dark window shattered. The place smelled of wet ash and old grief. He hadn't expected a welcome, just shelter enough for the night. Mara slid off the horse, legs stiff, face pale with cold. She stared at the ranch house as though she'd seen it before. You live alone? Mostly, Ezra said, pushing open the warped door. The hinges cried like gulls. Had help once. They left when the pay stopped. Inside, the fire had gone out. Dust floated in the dim light, the air stale with disuse. Ezra moved through the room, stacking wood in the hearth, striking a match. The flame caught slow, painting the walls in flickering amber. Mara wandered the room, her eyes lingered on the rifle above the mantel, the cracked portrait beside it. a man with Ezra's jawline holding a surveying rod. Your father? Ezra nodded once. Died last spring. She touched the edge of the frame. He worked for the railway? Ezra froze. How'd you know that? The instrument, she said softly. Only engineers carried those. He didn't answer. The old bitterness clawed up his throat. The nights watching his father draw maps by lamplight, muttering about debts that had no names. He'd sworn never to speak of it again. They ate quietly. Stew warmed over the rekindled fire. Mara sipped, then laid down her spoon. You didn't have to help me today. I wasn't helping, Ezra said. Just couldn't stomach the sight. She gave a faint smile. Same thing where I come from. He glanced at her across the table. And where's that? She hesitated. West of here, before the railroad came through. He waited for more, but she didn't continue. The silence thickened until the wind rattled the shutters again. Outside, a lone horse approached. Ezra's hand went to the rifle. The door creaked, open to reveal Sheriff Boyd, slick coat shining with sleet, badge dull under the lamplight. Evening, Cole, Boyd said. Heard there was trouble at Murphy's. You bring that trouble home? Ezra stepped forward. Depends what you call trouble. Boyd's eyes slid to Mara. Indenture papers list her property of the Elk Run Company. You planning to return her? She's not property. Boyd shrugged. Law says otherwise. Hargreaves' men will be asking come morning. Then they can ask me, Ezra said. Boyd looked around the ruined room, gaze lingering on the portrait above the mantel. Your old man signed for that company, didn't he? Funny how debts follow a family. Get out, Ezra said quietly. The sheriff tipped his hat. You'll want to think this through, Cole. Some bargains don't end when the snow melts. He left without another word, boots crunching across the porch. Mara stared at the closed door. He knows me. Ezra frowned. How? I don't know, she said too quickly. Maybe he saw me in town before. He didn't press, but her tone left splinters of doubt. Later, while she cleaned the dishes, he stepped outside. The night was cold enough to bite. He looked down at the valley, the half-collapsed barn, the cattle huddled like ghosts against the fence line. He'd built nothing that lasted. Footsteps behind him. Mara wrapped her shawl tighter. Your herd won't make it through March if you keep them penned like that. They've survived worse. She shook her head. No, they're starving. You've got haystacks rotting under ice 3 ridges north. Saw them when we rode in. You could trade feed with the Harris farm, patch your fence with what's left of the East Corral. Ezra turned, surprised. You saw all that? Counting's a habit, she said. I used to keep ledgers. He stared at her, studying the calm precision in her voice. Whoever she'd been, she wasn't some house servant. What were you before they sold you? Someone who made bad deals, she said simply, then walked back inside. He watched her go, unease crawling under his skin. The mare stamped in the snow, restless. From the dark ridge beyond the corral came a faint glint, metal catching moonlight. Ezra squinted, hand tightening on the rifle. A figure on horseback lingered just long enough to be seen, then vanished into the storm. He waited until the echo of hooves faded before returning inside. Mara sat near the fire, drying her shawl. "There's someone out there," he said. She didn't look up. "Then we're not forgotten." Her words chilled him more than the wind. He sat opposite her, the flames between them. For the first time, he noticed the scar across her left wrist. Thin, deliberate, almost surgical. A mark of chains once worn or cut away. "You ever plan on telling me what you're running from?" Mara met his eyes. "Maybe when I'm sure you're not part of it." The clock on the wall ticked once, then stopped. Ezra leaned back, staring at the ceiling beams darkened by years of smoke. "You can have the spare room. Door locks from the inside." "Appreciate that," she said, voice steady. He nodded, though his thoughts were anything but. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, not from the sky, but from iron wheels grinding on frozen rails. By dawn, tracks would cut the valley in two. He felt it in his bones. The storm broke by midday. What remained was silence. White hills, black branches, and smoke rising thin from Ezra's chimney. He was mending a fence rail when he heard the hoofbeats, slow, measured, unafraid. The rider came from the south trail, wrapped in a blanket of red and brown weave. Her hair was streaked with gray feathers, her gaze calm and level. "Chief Nayeli of the Ute, from Elk Run," she said, dismounting. Her voice held the weight of someone used to being obeyed. "I bring warning, Cole. The company men move the markers again." Ezra rested the hammer against the post. "You're sure?" "They've already shifted the north ridge. When the snow melts, their line will claim half your valley and most of ours." He exhaled. "That line's been set since my father's day." "Maybe, but the snow covers many things." Her eyes slid toward the barn, where Mara stood in the doorway, shawl drawn tight. "Who's she?" Nayeli asked. "Debt worker," Ezra said. "Not mine. Just someone I couldn't leave behind." Nayeli studied Mara a long moment. Her eyes know maps. The way she looks at land. She measures it. Mara stepped forward, meeting that gaze without flinching. "I used to keep survey ledgers," she admitted, "before the company erased the numbers." Ezra turned sharply. "What do you mean erased?" "Their engineers draw two maps," she said. "One for the law, one for profit. You think those fence markers are honest? They're graves." The word hung heavy. The chief nodded slowly, as though confirming something she'd already guessed. "Then you understand why I came." They sat inside, warming hands over the hearth. Nayeli spread a damp map across the table, a rough sketch of Elk Run, scarred by water stains and burned edges. "When they lay new rails, they plan to flood the low meadows. We'll lose the winter pasture, and you'll lose your water rights." Ezra frowned. "There's no river basin wide enough for flooding." "Not flood by water," Mara interrupted, eyes narrowing. "Flood by paper. They'll declare the land unproductive and seize it under the Territorial Railway Act." Nayeli's gaze sharpened. "You knew this?" I saw the drafts before they sold me, Mara said quietly. They call it clearing titles, but they're clearing people. Ezra leaned back, the firelight catching his face. And you came here why, Chief? Because your name was on the last map, Nayeli replied. Cole Parcell, signed in old ink. Your father's signature still binds your ground to their plan. If you don't fight it, they'll say you agreed. He stared at the flickering paper, his jaw tight. He thought he was buying us protection. Nayeli's tone softened. Maybe, but men who trust the company end up watching their fences rot. From outside came a faint jingle, metal on metal. Ezra moved to the window. 3 riders were cutting across the ridge, rifles slung, coats bearing the Elk Run company emblem. They're early, Nayeli said. I'll speak to them. She stepped outside before Ezra could stop her, posture regal, her horse waiting like a shadow. The men reined in near the corral. Morning, Chief, one called, smirking. Didn't expect to find you trespassing on Cole land. This valley doesn't belong to you, she replied, nor your papers. The man laughed, flipping open a folded document. Contract says otherwise. Signed by old Jeremiah Cole, witness Boyd, notarized Denver office. Ezra's stomach clenched at his father's name. Let me see that. Sorry, the man said, tucking it back. Company property. The second rider aimed his rifle at a fence post and fired. Wood splintered. Seems your line's a little off, Cole. Ezra's hand drifted toward his gun. Nayeli's voice cut sharp. Not here. Not today. The riders snickered and turned back toward town. As they rode off, the first shouted, Tell your woman to keep her mouth shut. The company don't like clever help. Mara stood frozen, fists clenched at her cities. The smell of gunpowder mixed with pine smoke. Inside, Ezra slammed the door. They had Boyd's name on that paper. Nayeli nodded. Sheriff takes the company's coin. His badge is worth less than a broken spur. Mara unrolled her shawl and spread it across the table. Hidden in the lining were torn scraps of paper, ledger fragments, company stamps, half-burned pages. I took these before they sold me, she said. If we match them to the real maps, we can prove forgery. Ezra blinked. You stole from Hargreave. I copied, she corrected. Stealing implies he owned the truth. For a moment, silence. Then Nayeli reached into her saddlebag, pulling a small leather pouch. She spilled its contents, 5 brass tokens, each stamped with the company seal. Payment for silence, she said. They offered them to my counsel. I kept them as evidence. Mara looked from the coins to the scraps of maps. Then we have motive, means, and proof. Ezra shook his head. Proof means nothing if no one listens. Nayeli smiled faintly. Then we'll make them listen. She rose, pulling her blanket tight. Tomorrow I ride to Red Hollow. There's an old survey camp there. You'll find what your father tried to hide. Ezra frowned. And if we find nothing, then at least you'll know whether your family built fences or graves. As she stepped into the cold, the wind carried the sound of her horse's hooves fading into the valley. Mara gathered the scraps, her hands trembling slightly. You still trust me? I don't trust anyone, Ezra said, but I hate liars more than thieves. She gave a short nod. Then we'll get along fine. Outside, the last embers of sunset burned against the snow, red as dying fire. In the distance, a train whistle echoed. 3 sharp notes, like a warning. By the next dawn, the sky turned the color of pewter. Frost smoked off the corral fences as Ezra saddled the mare, loading a rifle and a coil of rope. Mara appeared from the barn carrying a canteen, her gray dress now patched with an old duster coat. You sure about this? He asked. She tightened the strap. Your father's camp was at Red Hollow. If there's truth buried there, it won't dig itself up. They rode out as the sun crawled over the ridge. The snow glittered like shards of glass, each hoofstep crunching loud in the hush. For a time, neither spoke. Mara rode steady, eyes scanning the hills like someone reading invisible lines. Ezra noticed how she counted distances under her breath. You still draw maps in your head, he said. Once you've measured land, she replied, you never stop seeing what doesn't belong. They reached the first survey post by noon. It leaned at a crooked angle, half buried in ice. Ezra brushed the snow off and froze. Burned into the wood was a mark, an ornate C crossed by a hammer stroke. His family crest. Mara knelt, gloved fingers tracing the lines. That shouldn't be here. This is 2 miles south of the real boundary. Maybe my father moved it. No, she said. Someone wanted it to look like he did. Ezra stared at the carving. The hammer stroke was wrong. Deeper, sharper, made by a metal tool rather than the wooden brand his father had used. He remembered the old man's trembling hands, the way he'd refused to explain the papers in his desk. A gust of wind howled through the ravine. Mara straightened, scanning the ridge. We're not alone. Ezra saw them then. 3 riders, silhouettes against the pale sky. Company men again. The one in front carried a rifle slung low. Ride, Ezra said. They spurred downhill as bullets whined off the rocks. The horses thundered through drifts, snow bursting around them like smoke. Mara clung to the saddle horn, her braid whipping loose. Another shot cracked. Ezra's hat flew from his head. They cut between the boulders into the narrow gut of Red Hollow, the canyon walls closing around them. A bullet sparked against stone beside Mara's leg. Ezra swung the rifle from his back, turned in the saddle, and fired once, just enough to make the riders scatter. Keep going, he shouted. The trail narrowed to a frozen creek bed. Mara's horse slipped, nearly went down, but she steadied it. Up ahead, the canyon forked left and right. She pointed left. That way, there's shelter. They burst into a shallow cave framed by pines. The sound of hooves echoed closer, then faded as the pursuers slowed to search the main trail. For now, they were safe. Ezra dismounted, chest heaving. He knelt by the wall of the cave. Scrawled in soot and faded chalk were markings, numbers, arrows, and at the center, the same family crest, drawn backward. Mara approached, holding the lantern. Your father's work? Maybe, Ezra said. Or someone who wanted me to find this. He touched the symbol, and the chalk smeared under his glove, revealing faint letters underneath. S.H. Contract paid. Hargreave, Mara whispered. He was here. Ezra sank onto a rock. My father was supposed to protect this valley. He said the company's deal would keep us safe. I thought he was just naive. Mara sat beside him, voice low. Sometimes men sign their names because they think it'll save their families. They never realize it kills someone else's. For a long moment, the cave filled only with the sound of dripping water. Ezra stared into the small fire they'd built, flames reflected in his eyes. Flashback flickered in his mind. His father at the kitchen table, ink bottle open. Hargreaves' gloved hand pressing the pen into his fingers. Just a formality, Jeremiah, the man had said. Protection for your boy. Then the sound of a stamp. Elk Run Company. And the look of shame that never left his father's face after. The memory faded with the hiss of the fire. Mara unrolled the ledger scraps, matching symbols from the cave to the fragments. He tried to fight them, Ezra. See this note? Copy retained. Elk Run duplicate false. Your father hid the original map somewhere. Ezra looked at her. You think he left it for me? For someone he trusted. Maybe for the truth itself. Outside, a branch snapped. Both froze. Ezra blew out the lantern, drawing his revolver. Footsteps crunched outside the cave mouth. A voice drifted through the cold air. You can't hide forever, Cole. The company riders had found them. Ezra motioned for silence. Mara reached for the rifle, but he shook his head. No shots unless they come in. The shadows moved against the light of the snow. One rider dismounted, peering inside. Ezra counted the distance. 10 feet, maybe 12. He waited, breath shallow. The man stepped forward, gun raised. A crack echoed, not from Ezra's weapon, but from above. A boulder tumbled down, smashing the snowbank beside the rider. Shouts erupted. The horses reared, bolting down the trail. Ezra ran to the entrance, looking up. On the ridge, a figure on horseback lowered a long rifle. Chief Nayeli, cloak flaring in the wind. She raised 2 fingers in silent salute before vanishing into the trees. Mara exhaled. She saved us. For now, Ezra said. He turned back toward the cave wall, where the crest glowed faintly in the firelight. The mark wasn't just a boundary. It was a message, a warning carved by his father's hand, or by guilt itself. We'll need to find that original map, he said. If Hargreaves' men are this close, it means it still exists. Mara packed the scraps carefully. Then we go where he couldn't. As they stepped out into the dying light, the last sunrays hit the carving on the post outside the cave, making it shine like gold before sinking into shadow. Behind them, the wind carried the echo of hooves fading east, toward the valley where law and ownership blurred like footprints in snow. The next morning broke sharp and gray, the kind of cold that bit through wool and bone alike. Ezra and Mara rode toward Millfield with the cave's soot still on their hands and a dozen questions burning between them. The valley below was waking, thin smoke from chimneys, dogs barking at the edge of the yards, the faint clang of the blacksmith's hammer. But the town didn't feel alive. It felt watched. As they entered the main street, heads turned. A few ranch hands paused mid-step, eyes flicking from Ezra's ragged coat to Mara's pale face. Word of the auction had spread fast. "Keep your head down," Ezra murmured. "I'm not the one they're looking at," Mara said quietly. They stopped outside Miller's saloon, its sign creaking overhead. Ezra tied the horses and pushed through the swinging doors. The air was thick with pipe smoke and the stale sweetness of spilled whiskey. Behind the bar, Miller polished glasses, rag that looked dirtier than the glasses themselves. "Well, I'll be," Miller drawled. "Ezra Cole, back from the dead. Thought the bank took your spread." "Still standing," Ezra said. "For now." Mara lingered near the doorway, eyes scanning the room. Rail workers, a few gamblers, 2 off-duty deputies nursing coffee. At the corner table, an old man with a shock of white hair looked up from his drink. His left eye clouded, his right sharp as a hawk's. "Name's Hank," Miller said under his breath. "Used to run supply wagons for the railway. Knows things." Ezra walked over, dropping a coin on the table. "Buy you a fresh pour, old-timer?" Hank squinted. "Cole, ain't it? You've got your daddy's eyes. Never liked his company." Ezra sat. "You work the Elk Run line. I'm looking for a man named Yeston Quinn." The old man's face twitched. "You don't want to look there. Quinn's dead." "Where?" Mara's voice cut through the smoke. She'd moved closer, her shawl falling open just enough for the old man to see the scar on her wrist. Recognition flickered. "I'll be damned," Hank whispered. "They said you were gone with him. They buried him behind the quarry, east of the trestle bridge. Hargreave called it an accident. Rock slide during grading. But there wasn't no slide. Just bullets and a shallow grave." Mara's breath caught, but she didn't flinch. "Who pulled the trigger?" Hank glanced toward the bar, lowered his voice. "Sheriff Boyd signed the report. Said it was bandits. Only bandits in those hills wore company boots." Ezra's fists tightened. "You saw this?" "I hauled the bodies," Hank said. 2 coffins. One opened before we reached town. I saw the other man's face." His single clear eye locked on Mara. "Wasn't Quinn in that box. Whoever they buried, it wasn't him." The saloon door swung open. Sheriff Boyd stepped inside, brushing snow off his hat. His gaze landed on them like a rifle barrel finding its mark. "Cole," he said slowly, "you've got a bad habit of asking questions that make folks nervous." "Just paying my respects," Ezra replied. Boyd's grin was thin. "Then pay 'em somewhere else." He turned to Hank. "Old man, you talk too much. Go home." Hank rose, muttering, and slipped out the back. Boyd watched him go, then looked back at Mara. "You shouldn't be here, Miss Quinn, or whatever name you're using now." Ezra stepped forward. "You know her?" "I signed her indenture papers," Boyd said. "She belonged to the company until you decided to play hero. She's free now, Not according to the law, Boyd answered, and the law is whatever I say it is. The room went still. Even the gamblers stopped shuffling their cards. Mara's voice was calm. You're afraid of what I know. Boyd smiled, showing no teeth. Afraid? No, miss. Just tired of paperwork. He turned to leave, then paused at the door. Word of advice, Cole. Hargreaves patient, but not generous. He means to collect what your father owed, one way or another. When he was gone, the saloon seemed to breathe again. Ezra glanced at Mara. He called you Quinn. That was my name, she said. Still is. You said you were a bookkeeper. I was a wife first. The truth fell between them like an anvil. Ezra thought of the grave by the quarry, the bullets, the falsified reports. And Hargreave killed him? Not with his own hands, she said, but his orders did. Quinn found proof the company was shifting survey lines to steal grazing rights. He hid the real map before they came. That's why they sold me, to erase his name. Ezra rubbed his jaw, the pieces clicking together with painful clarity. And you think my father signed the map that let it happen, Mara finished. Maybe under threat, maybe for money. I don't know. But every inch of this valley bleeds from that pen. Outside, a train whistle wailed across the plains. Ezra felt it in his chest like a heartbeat that wasn't his. He rose, tossing a coin onto the counter. Let's go. Mara followed him into the gray light. The snow had turned to fine ash drifting from the coal engines up the track. At the hitching post, Hank appeared again, coughing into his sleeve. He pressed a folded scrap into Ezra's hand. Found this in the old depot years back. Didn't know what it meant till now. Ezra unfolded it. A sketch of a canyon, a circle drawn around a cluster of trees, and beside it, his father's initials. Red Hollow, Ezra murmured. Hank nodded. That's where your old man hid what Quinn died for. Don't waste time. Boyd's already sent word to Hargreave. Ezra looked down the street. The sheriff's horse stood at the far end, steam rising from its nostrils, the badge on Boyd's chest catching the light. He turned to Mara. We ride tonight. She met his eyes. Then we'd better start running before the law remembers we exist. The wind carried the sound of a church bell from somewhere beyond the ridge. 3 dull tolls, each one slower than the last. They left Millfield under the cover of night. The moon was a thin coin hanging over the valley, the snow glinting like steel. Ezra rode ahead, the old map scrap clenched in his glove. Mara followed close, her cloak pulled tight, eyes fixed on the dark hills that loomed like sleeping beasts. Behind them, a single lantern flickered in town, Sheriff Boyd's office. The law was already awake. They crossed the ridge toward Red Hollow, the wind slicing through the pines. For miles, nothing but hoofbeats and the creak of leather. Ezra finally broke the silence. You could have told me sooner. About Quinn. About the maps. You wouldn't have believed me then, she said. I barely believe you now. Then don't, she replied. Just ride. They descended into the narrow pass where the land twisted like a scar. In the distance, the half-collapsed trestle bridge stretched over the ravine, where Hank said Quinn had died. The wood groaned under the weight of years. Ezra dismounted and tied the horses in the trees. "We go on foot from here." The air smelled of iron and damp rock. They climbed through the rubble, lantern light trembling on the canyon walls. Half buried under frost was a survey chest, its lid split, hinges rusted. Inside lay a handful of papers, blank from water damage, and a small leather notebook blackened by soot. Mara knelt, brushing off the dirt. The initials YQ were still visible on the cover. She opened it carefully. Pages filled with smudged numbers and faint sketches, coordinates, contour lines, and at the very back, a section written in mirrored script. "Quinn wrote backward," she murmured. "He must have used graphite. Look." She held the page toward the light. The faint reflection gleamed gray. "If we rub it with dust or ash, the marks will show." Ezra crouched beside her, scraping a piece of charcoal from the lantern wick. They rubbed gently, and the lines began to rise, like ghosts out of fog. The map revealed itself. Elk Run Valley, the coal ranch, the railway extension. A circle drawn in thick graphite around a spot labeled coal boundary. True line. Mara whispered, "He hid proof of the forgery right here. And your father, he must have known." Ezra stared at the signature on the margin. Jeremiah Cole, witness to adjustment. His jaw clenched. He signed this knowing it would steal half the valley. "Maybe he didn't have a choice," Mara said softly. "You saw what they do to men who fight back. You don't know him." "I know guilt," she said. "It writes the same in every hand." Before he could reply, a faint sound echoed through the canyon. A horse's whinny, muffled by distance. Ezra doused the lantern. "They're tracking us!" They ducked behind the broken timbers. Voices drifted from the ridge above. Company riders searching. "Check the creek bed. Hargreave wants that notebook." Mara clutched the book to her chest. "If they take this, it's over." Ezra drew his revolver. "Then they won't." The riders spread out, lamps swinging. Shadows leapt across the canyon walls. Ezra motioned to a side tunnel, an old mine shaft half hidden by brush. They slipped inside, crawling through the dark until the smell of gunpowder and sweat faded behind them. Inside the shaft, the walls glittered faintly with mineral dust. Ezra lit a match. The flicker caught a name scratched into the beam. Jeremiah C. "Forgive me." He froze, staring. Mara touched the carving with her fingertips. "He left this for you." The match burned down to his skin. He let it die. "I don't know what I'm supposed to forgive." "Maybe not him," she said quietly. "Maybe yourself." Outside, gunfire cracked. The riders had found their horses. One bullet ricocheted off the rock, showering sparks. Ezra grabbed Mara's arm. "Move!" They ran through the shaft until it opened into a hidden hollow overlooking the lower valley. Snow drifted in from a gap in the roof. From here they could see lanterns weaving along the trail, like fireflies hunting prey. Mara opened the notebook again, turning to the last page. There was a final entry written in faint graphite. If found, trust no sheriff, no lawman under the company seal. Deliver to the Ute elder of Elk Run, N. Nayeli, Mara said. He meant Chief Nayeli. Quinn must have known she'd keep it safe. Ezra took the book, flipping through the torn pages. Then that's where we're headed. You think she'll help us? She's already saved our lives once. He tucked the notebook into his coat, glancing toward the distant lanterns. But we won't make it by dawn if they've got dogs. Mara smiled faintly. Then we don't go by trail. She pointed to the frozen creek below, winding like a vein through the canyon. That runs under the valley straight to Elk Run. We follow the ice. Ezra looked at her. This woman he'd met less than 2 days ago, already tangled in his blood and his father's sins. You sure it holds? No, she said, mounting her horse. But truth's heavier than we are. They rode down onto the ice, the horse's hooves echoing in the hollow, each crack of frost sounding like a warning shot. Behind them, the first rider reached the ridge and saw their trail disappearing into the dark. His shout carried on the wind. Tell Hargreave! They've got the notebook! Ezra urged his mare faster, heart pounding. He looked once at Mara, the pale glow of the notebook's graphite faint against her coat. In that light, she seemed both fragile and indestructible, like hope scraped thin but still shining. The canyon curved ahead, the frozen creek vanishing into black water where the ice began to melt. We can't cross that, Ezra said. We don't have to. Mara pulled the reins. The Ute camps on the ridge above. From there, we'll decide who to trust. He looked back toward the lights climbing the canyon. They'll be right behind us. Then we climb fast, she said. By the time they reached the upper ridge, the sky had turned to bruised indigo. Smoke rose faintly from a cluster of distant fires. The Ute camp. Ezra and Mara dismounted, breath clouding the air, hooves muffled by the snow-packed earth. They had ridden hard all night, the graphite-stained notebook tucked inside Ezra's coat like a heartbeat that wouldn't quiet. At the edge of the trees, Chief Nayeli waited. She stood beside her horse, wrapped in a dark wool blanket, eyes reflecting the thin firelight. You were followed, she said without question. Ezra nodded. Company riders. They know we found the notebook. Then they'll burn half this valley to get it back, Nayeli replied. Come inside before the sun gives them aim. The camp was quiet but alert. Warriors moved through the shadows, laying brush over the horses' tracks. Women tended fires, smoke coiling into the cold air like whispered prayers. Inside the largest lodge, Mara sat beside the fire pit while Ezra spoke with Nayeli. You said Quinn sent word before he died, Ezra began. He trusted you. Nayeli nodded slowly. He came here 3 winters past, with maps and sorrow. Said the company had buried men alive under their own fences. I warned him not to return to Millfield. He didn't listen. Mara's voice broke the silence. He couldn't. He believed the law could still work. Nayeli studied her. You speak as if you knew him well. Mara looked up, and something in her face shifted. Resignation, not fear. I was his wife. Ezra turned sharply. You said... I said I kept ledgers, she interrupted, voice steady. I didn't say whose. He stepped closer, the firelight throwing sharp lines across his jaw. All this time you used me to find his map. I used your sense of decency, she said, because it was the only thing left in this valley that wasn't for sale. Nayeli's expression did not change. Why come to me now? Because Quinn wrote your name in his last page, Mara said. She pulled the notebook from Ezra's coat and placed it on the ground between them. The faint graphite glimmered like a hidden star. Rate, slow. He believed you'd protect what the company couldn't erase. Nayeli opened the book with careful hands, turning to the mirrored page of coordinates. These marks, she murmured. They match the sacred boundary stones near Elk Run. Your valley and ours share the same line. Ezra stared into the fire. Then my father's signature didn't just steal from settlers. It cut into your land, too. Yes, Nayeli said softly. But guilt is only useful if it changes something. Ezra clenched his fists. I didn't know. Knowing is not the same as choosing, Nayeli said. You have a choice now. Outside, a drumbeat rolled across the snow. One, then two, then silence. A warning. Nayeli rose. They've found us. Through the gaps in the lodge wall, Ezra saw lanterns moving along the ridge. Company riders flanked by Sheriff Boyd's men. The camp stirred to life. Nayeli barked orders in Ute, and her warriors melted into the trees with rifles slung low. She turned to Ezra. You can fight with us or you can run. But if you stay, you stand by more than your own ghosts. Ezra loaded his revolver. I've been running since the day my father died. I'm done. Mara met his eyes. Then so am I. A gunshot cracked the air. The first bullet punched through the lodge wall, scattering sparks. Ezra pulled Mara down as wood splintered above them. Nayeli's voice cut through the chaos. Get to the river trail! They sprinted into the night. Fire bloomed behind them as the riders poured into camp, torches throwing wild shadows. Ezra fired twice, dropping one man before the others scattered under Ute return fire. The sound of battle roared across the valley. The crack of rifles, the scream of horses, the echo of vengeance long denied. Mara stumbled near the riverbank, clutching the notebook. If they get this, everything dies with it. Ezra grabbed her wrist. Then hide it. She looked around, saw an old tree hollow near the bank, and wedged the book deep inside before covering it with snow. If I fall, it stays here, she said. You're not falling, he said, pulling her to her feet. They crossed the frozen shallows, bullets snapping the air around them. Then, silence. The shooting stopped as suddenly as it had begun. From the far ridge, Boyd's voice carried across the water. You can't run forever, Cole. You think you're fighting for justice, but you're just cleaning your father's mess. Ezra raised his revolver but didn't fire. The man's words stung because they were half true. Nayeli appeared behind them, her bow drawn. He's stalling, she said. They'll circle us from below. Move. They climbed through the trees, breath sharp and shallow. At the top of the hill, the Ute signal fires burned low, 3 points of red fading into the distance. Safe for now. Ezra leaned against a rock, chest heaving. "You planned this," he said to Mara. "From the start." She met his gaze without flinching. "I planned to finish what Quinn died for. I didn't plan on you." He looked away, the truth sitting heavy as iron. Somewhere below, the company men were dousing the flames of the camp. Their victory temporary. "Then what now?" he asked. "We find that original map," she said. "And when we do, we show them the kind of justice they've never paid for." Nayeli's shadow passed between them. "Justice isn't won in a day," she said. "But every lie burned tonight is one less to bury tomorrow." The wind rose, carrying ash through the trees, black flakes drifting like snow. Mara's shawl fluttered open, revealing the faint outline of her wedding ring chain around her neck. Ezra noticed it, said nothing. Some ghosts were better left to whisper. As dawn began to break, the first light caught the ridge where Red Hollow fell into mist. The world below was smoke and ruin. Ezra looked at Mara. "You said you didn't plan on me. You still think you can do this alone?" Her eyes held his. "No. But I'd rather fail with truth than survive with lies." He nodded once. "Then we start there." Below them, a crow circled the burning camp and let out a single cry, long, echoing, almost human. When the smoke cleared over Red Hollow, the valley smelled of ash and cordite. The Ute camp lay scattered, fires smoldering, footprints frozen in the mud. Ezra and Mara had hidden in a ravine through the night, waiting for silence. By morning, the only sound was the caw of distant crows circling the wreckage. Mara brushed soot from her sleeve. "They'll call this a skirmish," she said, "and they'll make it sound legal." Ezra stared toward the ruined camp. "No law in this territory's ever been legal, just written by whoever owns the ink." They rode east in grim quiet. The horses' hooves splashed through meltwater, the snow already receding into gray slush. Ezra's mind ran circles around what Boyd had shouted the night before. "You're just cleaning your father's mess." He wanted to believe the old man hadn't known, but the burned crest on that post said otherwise. By noon, the first rooftops of Millfield shimmered through haze. Ezra stopped his horse at the ridge. "We go to Boyd," he said. "If there's any justice left, it's in that notebook." Mara frowned. "Boyd's name is on every forged contract. You can't trust him." "I'm not asking for trust," Ezra said. "Just a warrant that forces Hargreave into daylight." She hesitated, then handed him the graphite-stained notebook. "Be careful. Truth burns faster than fire." He rode down alone. Millfield was half asleep under a haze of smoke and train steam. Ezra dismounted outside the sheriff's office, boots crunching on cinders. Inside, Boyd sat at his desk, hat off, reading a telegram by lamplight. "Well, look who came walking out of a ghost story," Boyd said without looking up. "You make a habit of surviving things you shouldn't, Cole." "I'm here to make it official," Ezra said. He dropped the notebook onto the desk. "Proof the company forged land deeds, Quinn's records, My father's signature was doctored. Boyd's brows lifted. That so? He flipped the book open, eyes moving over the graphite maps. You risked a lot bringing this here. Enough to bury Hargreave, Ezra said. The sheriff's smile was slow, deliberate. Maybe, or maybe enough to bury yourself. Before Ezra could draw, Boyd tossed the notebook into the stove. Flames leapt, devouring the pages in seconds. The room filled with the smell of burning paper. Ezra lunged forward, but Boyd's revolver was already trained on him. Easy, Boyd said. You want to die over scribbles? That was evidence. That was insurance, Boyd corrected. And now it's ash. Ezra's voice was raw. You sold out your own town. Boyd shrugged. Town's just dirt and cattle. The company builds railroads. Progress, Cole. You can't stop it. Ezra's hand twitched toward his gun. Boyd cocked the hammer. Don't. You shoot me and they'll hang you before sundown. You run, maybe you live till morning. For a long moment, the only sound was the hiss of paper turning to ember. Then Ezra turned and kicked the door open, storming into the street. Outside, the noon light glared harsh off the snow. Mara was waiting by the stables. She saw his empty hands and the look in his eyes. He burned it, Ezra said. I told you, she whispered. You can't reason with a man who's already sold his soul. Before he could answer, a dull boom rolled through the valley. They turned toward the ranch. Smoke coiled upward, black, heavy, and wrong. The barn. They rode hard, the wind cutting their faces. When they reached the property, the air was thick with smoke. The barn was a furnace, flames snapping through the beams. The cattle bawled in panic. Ezra leapt from his horse, yanked open the corral gate, driving the animals toward open field. Sparks rained across his coat, searing holes. Mara pulled at the water pump, but the well was dry. They drained it. Who? She didn't need to answer. The fence posts along the road were marked with the Elk Run seal, freshly branded. Hargreaves' men had come during the night, burned what was left of Cole Ranch, and left their signature behind. Ezra sank to his knees in the mud. They took everything. Mara crouched beside him, gripping his shoulder. Not everything. From her saddlebag, she pulled a folded piece of paper, gray with soot, but intact. What's that? I copied one of the notebook pages before we left the cave, she said. Pressed it against the graphite. The image bled through. She opened it, revealing the faint mirror lines of Quinn's true map. It's not perfect, but it's enough. Ezra stared at it. The lines trembled slightly where her hand had pressed too hard, but the coordinates were legible. You kept this from me. I kept it safe, she said. From everyone, including you. He wanted to be angry, but the sight of the burned barn cut deeper than betrayal. We can't stay here. No, she said. We go to the Ute. Nayeli can hide us. They rode until dusk, the smoke trailing behind like a black veil. When they reached the hollow where the camp once stood, there were only ashes. The lodges were gone, the ground scorched. Among the ruins, Nayeli's warriors moved silently, gathering what remained. The chief met them at the edge of the clearing, her face streaked with soot but unbroken. "You saw what they did," she said. "Now you know what they'll do next." Mara handed her the copied map. "This is all that's left. We can prove they stole every acre from here to the ridge." Nayeli examined it, nodding slowly. "The truth survives because liars are careless. This will be enough, if we live long enough to show it." Ezra looked toward the west, where the last light bled into the sky. "Then we find a way to make them listen." Nayeli's eyes narrowed. "There's a supply train leaving Millfield tomorrow night. It carries company ledgers, deeds, payroll, all signed by Hargreave himself. Take that, and even the governor will see." Mara glanced at Ezra. "You're saying we rob a train?" The chief's smile was small, sharp. "I'm saying you steal back what was taken. Justice rides faster than rail when it has a reason." Ezra tightened his reins. "Then we ride tonight." But Nayeli's expression darkened. "Be careful. Hargreave knows the truth lives. He'll send someone you trust to finish the job." Her warning hung in the cold air. Behind them, the burned valley stretched like an open wound, the smoke curling upward in slow, mournful ribbons. Ezra looked once more at the ashes of his father's ranch, then at Mara's soot-streaked face. "If Boyd wants to end this, he'll have to bury us himself." Nayeli's warriors began saddling fresh horses, the sound of metal and leather echoing under the rising wind. Somewhere far off, a train whistle cut through the dusk. Promise and a threat carried on the same note. The moon rose like a dull coin over the blackened valley. Ezra, Mara, and Chief Nayeli moved through the ruins of the camp, gathering what was left. Rifles, dried meat, the last horses not stolen or burned. The air was bitter with wood smoke and grief. From somewhere down the valley, the faint whistle of the Elk Run supply train echoed again, carrying with it the sound of power made of iron and greed. They didn't light fires that night. Too dangerous. The snow glowed faintly blue in the starlight as they crouched behind fallen timbers, planning. Nayeli pointed at the soot-smudged map Mara had copied. "The train stops at Elk Run crossing before midnight to refill the water tanks. That's when you strike. I'll draw their patrols to the ridge." Ezra studied the map. "We'll need horses and a flatbed cart. If we get those ledgers, the whole valley has proof." Nayeli gave a slow nod. "Proof is a weapon only if you survive long enough to use it." Mara sat apart, staring into the darkness. Ezra walked to her. "You haven't said a word since Millfield." "I'm thinking," she said, "about how easy it is to start a fire. You strike a match, and everything you love disappears." Ezra looked at her soot-stained hands. "We can build something new once this is done." She gave a dry laugh. "You sound like Quinn." "He was right, wasn't he?" "He was," she whispered, "and it killed him." Before he could answer, a whistle sliced through the wind, 3 short bursts. Nayeli's head snapped up. "Scouts, company riders on the south ridge." Within minutes, the camp was a blur of motion. Ute warriors doused their torches and melted into the tree line. Mara packed the remaining papers while Ezra checked his revolver. "Can they track us in the dark?" Mara asked. "They don't need to," Nayeli said. "They already know where we are." The first bullet came a heartbeat later, splintering a burned post beside them. Another followed, sparking off stone. Ezra pulled Mara down behind the cart. "Stay low." From the shadows, a dozen mounted silhouettes advanced, torches flaring. Boyd's voice carried across the clearing. "You should have left the ashes where they fell, Cole!" Ezra fired back, the muzzle flash lighting the night. The shot dropped one rider, but more poured in. Nayeli signaled her warriors, and a volley of arrows hissed through the dark, striking torches and throwing the attackers into confusion. "Fall back to the ridge," Nayeli commanded. They scrambled up the slope, bullets whining past. Mara stumbled, clutching the map copy. Ezra caught her arm and dragged her behind a rock outcrop. "You hurt?" "No, just tired of running." The hillside blazed with gunfire. Sparks danced in the snow like fireflies. Ezra returned shot for shot, counting his last cartridges. From below, Boyd's voice again. "You can't win this, Cole. The governor's already signed over the land. You'll hang for treason before sunrise." Ezra shouted back. "Then I'll hang standing, not kneeling." Nayeli crouched beside them, loading another rifle. "They're circling. 10 riders at least. We need another path out." Mara pointed toward the northern ridge. "There's a tunnel under the bluff. It leads to the creek bed." Nayeli nodded. "Go. I'll hold them here." Ezra shook his head. "You'll die." "Then let me choose where," she said simply. "The law took enough from me. It doesn't get my courage, too." Their eyes met. A wordless agreement forged in fire. Ezra grabbed Mara's hand. "Come on!" They ran, crouched low, slipping between burning brush and fallen logs. Behind them, Nayeli's rifle cracked again and again, each shot echoing like a drumbeat of defiance. At the tunnel mouth, Mara turned, tears streaking her soot-streaked cheeks. "She can't hold them forever." "She doesn't need forever," Ezra said. "Just long enough." They plunged into the tunnel, the air cold and damp. It reeked of earth and smoke. The passage narrowed until they had to crawl. Above them, the world shook with hoofbeats and gunfire. Then, slowly, the sounds faded. Mara exhaled shakily. "Did we make it?" "Not yet," Ezra said. "Boyd doesn't quit easy." A faint glow appeared ahead, the end of the tunnel. They emerged onto the frozen creek below, the same one that wound toward Elk Run crossing. The night was eerily quiet. Ezra scanned the horizon. "They'll expect us to head north. We follow the creek south. It's slower, but it hides us." Mara nodded, pulling the damp map from inside her coat. "If this gets ruined, we've got nothing." "Then keep it close." She folded it carefully, slipping it into a small leather pouch around her neck, the same chain that once held her wedding ring. Ezra noticed, but said nothing. The wind picked up, carrying the distant sound of hooves again. Ezra cursed under his breath. "They found the trail." Mara looked to the trees. "There's an old watchtower east of here. Abandoned mining post. We can rest there before dawn. They mounted quickly and rode through the frozen mist. Each gust of wind brought the echo of pursuit closer. As the tower came into view, Ezra slowed, scanning the tree line. Nothing moved but the snow. They reached the base, tethered the horses, and climbed the creaking ladder. Inside, the floorboards groaned under their boots. From up here, they could see the whole valley, burning dots of fire where the company torched what was left of the Ute camp. Mara sank against the wall, exhausted. How many more people have to burn before the truth matters? Ezra looked out the window. Enough to make the liars afraid. He turned back just as she pressed the pouch to her chest. If I don't make it to that train, you take this to the capital. Promise me. You're not dying on me, he said. Neither did Quinn, she murmured, until he did. Below, a flicker of light, lanterns moving through the trees. Ezra's hand went to his revolver. Boyd, he whispered. He's not done yet. The first bullet punched through the tower wall, scattering splinters. Down! Ezra shouted, grabbing Mara's arm as another shot cracked the air. They tumbled behind the rail as shadows surrounded the clearing. Boyd's voice rose from below, mocking. End of the line, Cole. Hand over the woman and maybe I'll let you keep your neck. Ezra leaned close to Mara. You trust me? I don't know, she said. Good, he said, cocking his gun. Then we might survive this. He fired into the darkness, the muzzle flash lighting the snow like lightning. The echo rolled down the valley toward the distant tracks where the train waited, steam whispering into the cold night, summoning them toward the final gamble. Dawn bled red across the ridges as Ezra and Mara crouched by the frozen creek, watching smoke coil from the Elk Run train. The plan was simple on paper: steal the company's ledgers before they reached Denver. But everything about it smelled like suicide. Mara adjusted the bandana at her throat. The second car holds the records. You cut the brake line, I jump. Ezra checked his saddle cinch. You ever done this before? She managed a grin. Once. It didn't go well. The train's whistle screamed. They spurred their horses forward, hooves hammering frozen earth. Steam swallowed them as the locomotive roared past, black and silver under the cold sun. Now! Mara shouted. Ezra threw a loop around a signal post, yanking the lever. Sparks leapt from the rails. The train shrieked, losing speed. Mara stood in her stirrups and jumped, catching the ladder of the last car. She climbed as the wind tore at her coat. Ezra galloped beside the moving cars, rifle ready. He aimed at the coupling between the rear and supply cars and fired. Metal screamed. The rear car broke loose, rolling down the grade. Inside, Mara burst through the door, swinging a wrench at two startled guards. One fell, the other lunged. She caught his rifle, slammed it against the wall, and sent him sprawling. Papers spilled like snow. Ezra leapt aboard as the detached car rattled to a halt. Together they tore open crates marked Elk Run Co. Inside, ledgers, deeds, signatures. Jeremiah Cole's name appeared again and again under Hargreaves' seal. This is it, Mara breathed. Before Ezra could answer, hoofbeats thundered up the trail. Boyd's men, rifles flashing. Get down, Ezra shouted, firing back through the shattered door. Bullets punched holes in the wood. Boyd's voice echoed over the chaos. "Hand it over, Cole. That paper dies with you." Then, a single rifle shot cracked from the ridge, clean and precise. One rider fell. Ezra looked up to see Chief Nayeli astride a dark horse, cloak flaring. Her warriors poured from the tree line, arrows cutting through the smoke. "Now!" she cried. Ezra grabbed Mara's hand and jumped. They hit the ground hard, rolling through gravel as the runaway car tumbled into the ravine below, exploding in a burst of fire and steel. The blast shook the valley. Nayeli galloped down to them. "You have it?" Ezra held up the sack of ledgers. Every lie they wrote. "Then ride," she said. "The judge signs Hargreaves' new contract at Elk Run by sunrise. If we show him this, the company falls." Mara caught her breath. "And if Boyd gets there first? Then he'll kill the truth before it ever speaks." They mounted and rode through the smoking pines. Behind them, the wreck burned bright against the snow, black plumes rising like a funeral pyre. Ahead, the valley opened toward Elk Run, the faint ring of the courthouse bell carried on the wind. Ezra glanced at Mara, her face streaked with soot and resolve. "You ever think justice rides faster than a train?" She smiled faintly. "Only when it's running out of track." The three riders vanished into the dawn, the fire behind them fading into mist. Morning broke gold over Elk Run, the courthouse bell tolling 6 times. A new banner fluttered above the square. Elk Run Railway Contract Signing, 9 a.m. From the ridge, Ezra, Mara, and Chief Nayeli watched the gathering crowd. Steam from the early train rose behind the courthouse like a warning. "That's where they'll sign the theft," Mara said. "Then we end it there," Ezra replied, tightening the reins. They rode down Main Street, 3 figures cutting through the whispering townsfolk. Hargreaves stood on the courthouse steps, silver watch gleaming, Sheriff Boyd beside him. The judge arranged papers across a table. Ezra strode up the steps. "Hold the signing," he said. Hargreaves' voice dripped with mock surprise. "Mr. Cole, I thought you'd burned with your ranch." Ezra dropped a sack at the judge's feet. "Those are your ledgers, proof you forged land deeds, using my father's name to steal half this valley." Boyd sneered. "Lies from an outlaw." Mara stepped forward, holding up the graphite copy of Quinn's map. "This is the real survey, the one your men killed my husband for." The crowd murmured. Hargreave waved a dismissive hand. "A widow's story isn't evidence." Nayeli's voice cut through the noise. "Then open the books." The judge untied the sack, spreading out the pages. Every signature matched, the same pen, the same ink. He looked up, frowning. "Forgery," Mara said. "Every one of them." Hargreaves' mask cracked. "You can't prove that in court." "We just did," Ezra said. Boyd drew his gun. "This ends now." Ezra moved first. One shot split the morning. Boyd staggered back, his gun spinning from his hand. The crowd gasped. Hargreave froze. Ezra leveled the revolver. "My father's name was used to bury the truth. I won't let yours do the same." The judge slammed his gavel, rate slow. "Enough," These records will be examined under territorial law. Sheriff Boyd, you're relieved of duty. Mr. Hargreave, you'll remain in custody pending trial. Deputies tore the badge from Boyd's coat and clamped irons on Hargreave. The company banners fluttered in the wind as the crowd erupted, half in shock, half in applause. Mara turned to Ezra. "You did it." He shook his head. "We did." Nayeli stepped forward. "Then let the land heal. Settlers and Ute will share its keeping." The judge nodded. By order of the court, ownership reverts to rightful claimants, Cole Ranch included. Ezra glanced at the folded map in Mara's hands, the graphite smudged with ash. My father thought he was saving me. Maybe he only bought me this chance. She smiled faintly. Then make it count. Sunlight poured over the square. The banners came down. Hargreave was led away, Boyd cursing in his wake. The crowd's cheers swelled, echoing against the mountains. Ezra looked out across Elk Run, the same valley that had once chained him to guilt. "No more lies," he said softly. Mara slipped her hand into his. "Then let's build something honest." Nayeli watched them, eyes calm, as the morning wind swept through the square. "Justice rides slow," she said, "but it never loses the trail." By mid-morning, Elk Run shimmered beneath pale sunlight. The courthouse square was quiet now. Banners torn down, company signs trampled into mud. The air smelled of fresh wood and coal smoke. Not ruin, but rebuilding. Ezra walked down Main Street, hat in hand. Mara waited by the hitching post, the graphite map folded in her shawl. "Strange," she said, "watching life grow out of ashes." "Maybe it was waiting for us to stop burning it," Ezra replied. Chief Nayeli rode up, her horse dusted with frost. "The judge left this," she said, handing him a parchment. "It names you and the Ute as co-stewards of the valley. Shared land, shared keeping." Ezra blinked. "You'd trust me with that?" Nayeli's tone was calm, certain. "Trust isn't given," she said. "It's built, like fences, straight or not at all." Mara smiled faintly. "That's fairer than most treaties I've seen." Nayeli mounted again. "Fairness isn't written, it's lived. Keep it alive." She turned her horse east, the wind catching her cloak as she disappeared toward the hills. Ezra looked at the parchment, then at Mara. "You'll stay?" "I thought about leaving," she said. "But there's no clean slate, only honest ground. I'd rather build on that." He reached into his coat, pulling a small velvet box. Inside, a plain gold ring glinted. "Bought this with the first herd I sold," he said. "Never thought I'd have reason to use it." Mara laughed softly. "A proposal in front of a burned courthouse?" "It's the only place I ever saw justice work." She slipped the ring on. "Then let's build something worth keeping." They rode home together. The valley glowed with new life. Workers from the town and Ute villages raising beams for a new barn. Children chasing horses through thawing fields. Smoke curled from chimneys again, not as warning, but warmth. Mara looked across the land. "You hear that? The wind sounds different." Ezra smiled. Used to sound like debt. Now it sounds like freedom. From the ridge, a train whistle echoed. Its tracks rerouted east, far from their fields. The sound no longer carried fear. Ezra tipped his hat. They built progress where it belonged. Mara squeezed his hand and left us to build what matters. The two stood watching the trail of smoke fade against the bright horizon. For a long moment, the valley was still, the world holding its breath. Funny, Ezra said quietly. I came to town for a $20 horse. Mara smiled and found something worth a lifetime. He laughed, soft and sure. Best trade I ever made. As the sun climbed, its light washed over new fences, grazing cattle, and a valley finally free. Nayeli's words lingered on the wind. Justice rides slow, but it never loses the trail. And so, beneath the wide skies of Elk Run, justice finally took root again. Ezra and Mara found more than land. They found peace, love, and the courage to start anew. The West may have changed, but the spirit that built it, the grit, the mercy, the belief in second chances, still rides strong in hearts like theirs. If this story stirred something in you, if it reminded you of the days when a man's word was his bond and a woman's strength could outshine any hardship, we'd love to hear from you. Tell us in the comments what part of Ezra and Mara's journey spoke to you most. If you believe that honor and kindness still matter in our modern world, please give this video a like. It helps keep these stories alive. And don't forget to subscribe, so you won't miss the next tale of courage and redemption under the western sun. From all of us who share these stories, thank you for spending this ride with us. Until next time, may your trails be gentle, your coffee strong, and your memories as warm as the firelight at the end of a long day on the frontier.